Pastor Doug here from Crossroads. It's great to be with you. I hope that today's message will draw you closer to Jesus.
Of the digital fast. If this is one of your first times with us, just to let you know, for the last few weeks, we have been, as a church, taking a look at our relationship with our phones, with our screens, with digital technology. And we've been taking 30 days to kind of pull back from some of that technology with the goal of hopefully helping us to create a healthier relationship between us and our phones, between us and our screens. And also, hopefully, that during this time we've been able to increase our hunger for God. Now, we are well into this fast, aren't we? Many of you, this is your last full week of the digital fast. And so, as we are coming into kind of the final phases of the fast, I thought it would be good to just take a moment and just reflect on where we're at before we head into where we're going. When we started this, in the early weeks of the fast, we were in the detach phase of the fast. Each one of you were asked to contemplate this idea. What would it look like for me to give up something in this fast? Whether it's social media, whether it's screens, news, something like this. What should I be giving up? And then what do I have to do on my part to be able to do that? Have to alter my behaviors, alter my habits, alter my routines, and start a whole new routine for 30 days. And you did that. Many of you have done that. How many of you would say that the detach phase, the actual getting rid of it, deciding, how many of you would say that was the hardest part so far? Any of you? Yeah, a few of you. Good. And so once we did that, we moved on to the next phase. That second week of the fast was all about discovery. Discovering what was there for us to find. Once we stepped back from our digital technologies, it made us aware of things in our lives. Maybe it was appetites and desires. Maybe it was our routines and our distractions. Or maybe it was just simply how integrated digital technology has become into our lives. Now, how many of you at some point during this have discovered something about yourself, about your habits, about anything about yourself during the fast? How many of you say, I've definitely discovered at least something about myself? Yeah. Now, you don't have to raise your hands for this one, but how many of you have found something or discovered something that you're not particularly happy that you found or that you discovered? Yeah, probably more than a few of us have found ourselves in that place in this moment. And last week, what you should have been working on this week is this whole idea of delight. Now that we've taken a space from our screens, now that we have opened up some space in our lives, how can we use that space and that time to be able to delight in God, to delight in fingertips? Because this fast was not just simply about letting go, but about finding new, better ways to occupy our time and to fill our minds. And hopefully, many of you have been able at some point during this to find things that you delight in doing, that you found a little bit more space or a little bit more time to delight in. Maybe you found a new activity or a new routine or a new outlet. Maybe you've been able to reconnect with your hobby that you just felt like you haven't had time to do. Maybe you've just allowed yourself to be less distracted and free to experience some of the joy. Now, there might be a number of you out there who have found this particular phase, the delight phase, to be one of the hardest. Because maybe you have had trouble figuring out, what do I do with this time that I might now have? Or maybe you filled that time, but maybe you filled it with things like more work, or more chores, or more things that maybe didn't give you the necessary delight that you were hoping for, and that you struggled with this particular phase. I know one of my favorite parts every time about doing these fall church-wide series where we're all kind of doing the same thing for the same season is the way that all of us have been able to connect with one another. To connect with one another about what we're doing, about how it's going, that we can kind of have those same conversations over and over again. And there's conversations that we're having about what we're doing and how the fast is going in groups, in the hallways, at meetings, over dinner, even with strangers and people outside the church. Just this past Tuesday, I was sitting in a cafe and I was working on this message, and I've got the Digital Fast book sitting on my table. And the woman next to me looks over and is like, "Are you doing a digital fast? That's awesome. I've always wanted to do something like that. Man, I am so addicted to my phone." And my husband, he's really addicted to his phone. Of course, that's all the way these conversations go. But she was talking about, oh, it's amazing. I hear other people are trying stuff like this. It seems like it's such a necessary thing. So we're having this great conversation, and then the guy on the other side of me starts chiming in. He wants to talk about the digital fast too. And so we end up having this three-way conversation for a number of minutes about this concept of the digital fast. And this is just some of the things that have come up and some of the cool conversations that we get to have around this topic. And I thought I would give you a few stories that we've come across and just a few things that are happening. And it was last Sunday, it was the end of the day, and my wife is sitting there on her phone. And one of the things she's been really working on for the digital fast is trying to just lower her daily average screen time to drop it down a couple of hours. And she was checking her app to see how much screen time she had last Sunday. She came up with 9 minutes. And she's like, "I'm on a great start." She was so excited just about the idea that it was Sunday and she was already off to a great start for her week on keeping her digital stuff down. But we heard many other things, and some of you from the board shared some of this stuff on Monday, and let me share it with you here. One of the things Kelsey said she was working on was not using her phone in bed. And then she said, mornings are a struggle. Mornings are a struggle because she wants to do stuff, but she doesn't want to get out of bed. Bernie talked about the fact that he was giving up social media for this fast. And his mother and his sisters recently did some traveling. And usually he would find out about how the trip went and what things were going on via Facebook or Instagram. But instead, because of the digital fast, he stopped by his mother's house to find out how it went in person. And Doug Shirk gave up the news. That was one of the things he was doing, was giving up the news. And him and Alicia used to sit there in the evenings and watch the news together. And now they've been finding other things to do during this time. And he just remarked about how much he hasn't missed having to be in the news all the time. And maybe some of you can relate to the story. That last one hits me. That's definitely one that I've found. And maybe you can relate to some of this. I would love to hear what your stories are. I would love to hear how it's going for you, what's going well for you, what you're struggling with. Go ahead and email me or just have a conversation with me at some point. I would love to hear what your stories are and how things have been going for you. Now, as we move forward with kind of the end of our digital fast, we're going to start to shift this conversation. So up until now, we've been talking about what we've been giving up and what we've been experiencing. But now, we're going to start to shift this to what's next. What's next? What do we do with what we're experiencing and learning? And what does it mean for us as we move forward after the fast? So the next 2 Sundays are going to do a deep dive into this. This week, we're going to start the process of processing what's been happening to us and what God is doing in our lives. And next week, we're going to come back and we're going to give you some personal, specific tools that you can use that are going to help you come up with a plan for how to move forward. So this week's phase that we're entering in the digital fast is called Determine. And it might be the most critical phase of the entire fast. Can I tell you what concerns me most as we end the fast, for me personally? I'm concerned that the fast is going to end for me, and it's going to be way too easy for me to just slip right back into the same digital patterns that I had before. And that it would just go back to looking like the exact same thing. And I don't know about you, but I've learned enough, I've experienced enough during this fast to know that I don't want to return to status quo. I don't want to go back to that exact same reality that I had before. How about you? Have you seen enough? Have you experienced enough? Have you learned enough from this to say, I want something to be different going forward? I want something to be different. Maybe you don't know what it is, and that's totally fine. That is a great place to start. Just know that something should be different. And if you're there, that's awesome. But there's a challenge to this. And there's a challenge that each one of us have to deal with. Let me ask you this. How many of you have ever been pulled over for speeding, gotten a ticket, and then didn't change your driving habits whatsoever? Yeah. Okay. How many of you have ever said, I am not going to get sucked into that extra purchase when I go to the garage, and yet found yourself purchasing extra packages, extra care things, premium filters, any of that stuff every single time you go? How many of you have gone to a buffet, eaten way too much food, decided you are never going to do that again, but you know you're absolutely going to do that again? All of these are the type of experiences that we know we should learn from, yet we often don't. We can be pretty good at not learning the lessons that are there for us to learn, can't we? We can be pretty good at seeing a better way forward, but not taking it. Very much often to our own detriment. There are so many times when God provides us with an opportunity to learn from our experiences, yet we're determined to miss them. And James warns us about this in his passage in James 1:23. It says this, anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in the mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. Now, how many of you is looking in the mirror part of your morning routine? Most of you, I would guess. Most of you. We look in the mirror because we want to see how bad it looks. Okay? And sometimes it can be pretty scary. But the mirror shows us the reality so that we have the opportunity to do something about it. Now, James is saying that our failure to learn and carry forward what God has revealed to us is as bad as us looking at the mirror in the morning, seeing that it doesn't look particularly well, and then doing nothing about it, just going about our day. And whatever foolishness or embarrassment or even worse that comes up as a result of that. Now for us, hopefully the digital fast has been like a mirror in our lives. It has shown us our habits, our desires, our distractions, how tech has impacted our lives, the joys and the delights that we had been missing out on. But for the digital fast to have any lasting value for us, we need to process what we've been seeing. And we need to act on what God has been showing us. And that's why I think the determine phase might be the most critical phase. So the next few weeks are going to determine for us whether this fast was just a 30-day hiccup and we go right back to the way things were, or if this is the beginning of a new, healthier way forward for us. Determine is all about deciding to be relentlessly intentional about understanding the lessons that God has for us and deciding how to act on them. So that's what we're going to begin to process this week. Now, to help us process, I want to give us a mental picture, a kind of a word picture, something in your head that you can use to process this and you can use to help determine. So at the beginning of this past year, my dad retired. And one of the questions I had was, what is he going to do with his time? I just didn't have any idea about how he was going to spend his time. Well, it turns out he was going to spend a lot of his time landscaping his yard. He was going to spend a ton of time outside. He ripped out dead trees. He planted new trees. He added stones. He was nurturing the ground cover. He was planting all kinds of new plants. His garden and his yard was completely transformed as a result of this. Now, for you, maybe you have a similar backyard that you have been carefully landscaping and developing. Maybe you have that flower bed that you've just been meticulously manicuring. Maybe you have that small patch of fruits or vegetables that you grow in your yard that you've been caring for. Or there are many, many of you who have very large fields full of crops that occupy your every waking moment. I want you to think about all the time, all the effort, all the hard work that goes into these type of activities to keep the plants healthy and growing and thriving. And I want you to picture your life as that garden, that patch, those fields. This is actually a very similar analogy to the one that Jesus uses in John chapter 15, comparing our life to a garden. Verse 1 says this, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. Now, as we look at this, just a couple of background pieces. This example of the vine or the vineyard was a very, very common analogy in the scriptures. One of the reasons for that is that Israel was full of grapevines. You could find them just about anywhere. So it would have been something that would have been very common, and everyone would have kind of understood what work went into that. Now, vines and vineyards are not particularly common in this area, but gardens, crops, plants, those type of things are. So whatever analogy connects to you most, use that in your mind as we're processing through this. It says here that God is the gardener. Now, a gardener concerns themselves with the proper growth of the vine, of plants, flowers, crops. And God, as gardener, is concerned about the healthy, proper growth of the branches. And that's us. Those of us who are believers are connected to the vine, which is Jesus. And our connection with him is how we grow. Let's look at verse 4. Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself, but it must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. Now, we are connected to the vine. We are part of this because we are connected to Jesus. As long as we stay with that, we are connected to the vine. Now, back in verse 2, God as gardener does two specific things. He cuts off and he prunes. Being a good gardener requires removing things that threaten and choke off healthy growth. You've experienced this in your garden, your flower bed, your crops. Trees and bushes need to be pruned. Weeds crop up and threaten the healthy growth of the plants and need to be dealt with. Bugs and animals threaten plants and crops. Even harsh conditions threaten. Too much rain, not enough rain. Too much sun, not enough sun. Any of those type of things come out and threaten the crops. And a good gardener does what they can and does what is necessary to help the garden grow healthy and thrive. They weed, they water, they spray, they prune, they cover. And when it comes to our lives, God wants to perform the same task in our lives. There are things in our lives that are unhealthy, that are preventing us from growing in Jesus and flourishing the way we should. Darren Whitehead, the author of The Digital Fast, says this: even the healthiest garden left unattended will sprout and spread weeds that choke out the flourishing of life. When we consider our own lives, weeds can certainly look like sin that needs to be dealt with before the Lord. But they can also be things like distraction. when we're distracted and not awake to the needs and opportunities around us, that can be a type of weed that comes and chokes out invitations to spread God's goodness. Now, for many of us, God wants to use the digital fast to cut off the unhealthy dead wood in our lives, to prune off the things that have become distractions and habits that are holding us back. And for this digital fast to make a difference in our lives, we're going to have to lean in to that pruning process. And that's going to be hard. And that's going to be a little bit painful. Maybe you've already started experiencing some of that as you've gone through it. To a pruned plant, it looks and feels like it's being damaged. But we know it's for its own good and for its long-term health and success. So where in our lives is God trying to use the fast to prune us? Now, for us to think through this is where we might be able to lean into that discovery phase of the fast. What type of things have come up? What have you been learning about yourself that you've been experiencing as you've stepped back? That might be a place where you can draw on things that God might be wanting to prune. That dead wood that needs to be cut off. Maybe you've seen examples of where you've just become so distracted. Or you've had unhealthy media consumption. Or you've just been addicted to the stimulus and the inputs that our phones and our screens provide to us. Or maybe for you, it's revealed a deeper pattern in your life that the technology was masking, that you're going to need to wrestle with and deal with. God may be trying to prune those areas of your life. So this week, as we look to determine, as we look to lean into this process, we should ask ourselves some questions. And one of them is, what should I leave behind? Once the fast ends, what should I leave back there in the past? Are there sinful, dead branches that God is trying to purge from your life? Are there things that you just shouldn't bring back after the fast? Lean into thinking about that this week. What should I handle differently going forward? Kind of that pruning process. Maybe there's something in your life that wasn't necessarily sinful, but something that you know going forward is going to need to be kept in check. Something that maybe, if done in excess, will create extra distractions for you or extra other emotions you didn't want to experience. These things you might have to consider putting guardrails up for. So for me, here's some of the things I'm going to be having to think through. What do I bring back on my phone and what don't I? What type of things should I leave in the past and what type of things shouldn't I? Should I, if I'm going to do social media, should I just leave it on my computer or should I bring it back on my phone? How do I prevent myself from going back to the place where I'm constantly just picking up my phone at any random moment to fill any space? How am I going to do that? How am I going to not do that again? How am I going to keep my phone from becoming my emotional sport during sporting events or my emotional support during sporting events? How am I going to keep myself from doing that? Those are some of the things that I'm going to have to spend time this week processing and thinking through. And so what I want you to do is spend some time thinking about these things this week. Journal about it, pray about it, talk with your family, your friends, your groups. Just like pruning a garden, this is going to take some time and this is going to take some effort. And don't feel like you have to formalize it or make decisions about all of these things in this space, in this week. Like I said, next week we're going to come back, we're going to give you some more tools to be able to process these things. But start that conversation. Start thinking about what it looks like going forward and what type of things you need to put up guardrails or leave behind. Now, determine isn't the only part of this. Pruning isn't the only part of the determine phase. Determine isn't just about getting rid of things in our lives. It's also about maximizing the positive, fun, healthy things that are going to help us grow and are going to help us thrive. So back to that verse 1 and verse 2 in there. Why is God pruning? Why is God cutting things off in our lives? Look what it says at the end of verse. So that it will be even more fruitful. Why does God do all this stuff? So that we can be more fruitful. Verse 5. I am the vine and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I will in you, you will bear much fruit. Do you understand? This is what God wants for you. He wants you to bear much fruit. He wants you to thrive. He wants you to succeed. He wants to use this experience of the digital fast to help you get closer to him and to help move you towards that life of vitality, that life of thriving. I don't know about you, but that is absolutely something that I want. Now, one of the other things a gardener does is they help create the best possible environment for the plants to thrive. And you know, each individual plant comes with its own specific care instructions, doesn't it? Like this plant right here. It came with this little stick here that gives you its personal care instructions. This particular plant needs to be watered once a week. It needs bright, indirect light. It wants to be kept between temperatures of 65 and 85 degrees, and you are supposed to apply balanced fertilizer once every 1 to 3 months. It's not very specific on that last one. But there's specific instructions on how this particular plant needs to thrive. And a good gardener will lean into the things and lean into the atmospheres to create so that the plants can thrive. God doesn't just want to use the fast to remove things from your life. He wants to show you the fun, healthy, fruitful things that you can do to grow and thrive. Quoting Darren Whitehead again, just like a garden needs regular attention and work, we need to pay regular attention to the opportunities before us to do something to bring flourishing into our lives and the lives of others. So for us, this is where we should lean into some of the things we've experienced in the delight phase of the fast. Maybe you started to figure out some things that might be on your own personal care instructions. Maybe finally you started baking again. Maybe you've made a point to take a walk after dinner. Maybe you've spent more time in face-to-face conversations with other people. Maybe during this fast, you've done a great job to carve out time to read the devotions and spend time in prayer and reading the scriptures. Or maybe you've just become more comfortable with silence, with rest, with just being. Or maybe you've determined that the light is still a little bit of a problem with you, but it's something you want to work on going forward. Maybe you've just experienced a level of clarity to think or to pray. This week, I want you to spend more time thinking through how we can create healthier environments for us to thrive. So ask yourself a few questions. What about the fast have you enjoyed? What actions, attitudes, or behaviors have helped you connect with God or helped you grow? What have you felt or experienced that you want to experience more of going forward? And what does it look like for you to create more space in your life to experience more of the things that you've enjoyed? This is a question to process for yourself, because it's not just about getting rid of the bad stuff in your life. It's about spending more time leaning into the good, healthy, positive things that will keep your mind right, that will keep your body healthy, that will keep your spirit nurtured. Now for me, I've had some fun experiences during the digital fast. One of the ones that was kind of a revelation to me was a couple weeks ago. I went to my parents' house and we were doing a campfire. We were roasting hot dogs and marshmallows, and we were over there, the whole family was over there. We were there for a couple of hours. And it was when I was driving home after that I realized I didn't pull my phone out once during that entire few hours of hanging out with my family. And just kind of hit me as a revelation. It's like, oh, that would have never happened before. I like that. I like the fact that I could just be with the people around me and not have to feel like I needed to check in with my phone. How do I experience more of that? I feel like I've been a little bit more comfortable just kind of being and not having to fill every single space with something. One of the other things I didn't even plan on getting rid of that I've found over this is I always fill my head with lots of information, always audiobooks, podcasts, all sorts of things. I've leaned more heavily into music over the last few weeks, and I've enjoyed the space that just not having to fill my head with information gives me. I want to listen to more music going forward, I think. What is it going to be for you? What type of things are going to help you cultivate an atmosphere where you can thrive? Talk with God this week about what you needed to be leaning into. Let's revisit this verse. John 15:5. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I will in you, you will bear much fruit. God wants you to thrive. He wants you to grow closer to him. He wants you to experience the great fruit in your life. And God wants to use this digital fast as an opportunity to prune your life, but also to lean in to those healthy habits. Will you take advantage of the opportunities this week? This week, begin to determine what it will look like for you going forward. Take time this week to process through all of the things that you have been experiencing. And then come back next week as we give you more tools on how to make this work in your life going forward. If you want to respond today, on your connection card on the back, this week, I will begin to think through what's going to be different. What do I need to be alert for? What are the things that threaten me that might need to be pruned in my life? Think through those. And what do I need to continue or start doing that's going to help me grow and thrive?
Thanks again for listening. Any step you take towards Jesus is a step in the right direction. You can find out more about us at crbic.org. That's crbic.org.